Welcome. Today we're going to discuss the technique locking horns and some of the ways in which we can relate it to other techniques in the American Kenpo system. Now keep in mind that these videos are not designed to be full comprehensive lists or family groupings, but rather different avenues to explore the American Kenpo system. So let's take a look at locking horns and see what relationships we can come up with. So let's start out with controlling the height zone. There's typically two ways in which we control the height zone, through manipulation or striking. So in this case, let's start out with manipulation and the different zones in which we can do that, since that's what we're doing in locking horns. So if we start out with locking horns, we are controlling the leg by attacking the knee and getting them to bend forward to control their height zone. So let's move this up and do something like thrusting prongs. So if you notice, we're now doing the same thing, getting them to bend forward, but we're using the hip and the shoulder rather than the knee. So since we're using the shoulder, let's continue with the shoulder and do something like tripping arrow, where we're now controlling their height zone, but instead of getting them to bend forward, we're getting them to bend to the side. So if we continue with that, we got them bending forward, we got them bending to the side, let's get them to bend backwards and continue to move up and now get to the head and do something like striking serpent's head, where we would be now controlling them by bending them backward and using the head. The interesting thing to notice is that we're doing that by pulling them using our left hand. So let's do an opposite and do a push with the right hand and do something like trigger salute. So now that we've done all the zones from the knee up to the head, let's go back and pick another one up all the way at the bottom, which would be the foot. And in this case, a combination of what we just did. So now we're going to be pulling rather than pushing, but we're going to be doing it to the foot rather than the head, but we're still going to get them to go backwards. And this would give you something like defensive cross, which again, we're doing it by the control and the manipulation of the leg. So now that we've done it through the manipulation, let's move on to the other one, which is the striking. So if you notice, we started it with trigger salute by striking with this heel palm. So let's continue, but in this case using the lower part. So something like delayed sword, where we're taking advantage of that kick to get them to bend. Or even something like checking the storm, where we do it with the left leg. So now that we did the bottom, let's come back to the top and do something like 5 swords. So if we take a look at 5 swords, we're doing it a couple different ways. The first one with this downward diagonal hand sword by getting them to settle their way down. Then we have our left hand doing that poke to get them to bend backwards. And yet again, the right hand getting them to bend forward by doing that uppercut. So now that we talked about controlling the height zone, let's look at this from a completely different point of view. In this case, where we're starting from, at a disadvantage. So typically we start our techniques from a non-ready, semi-ready, or a ready position, but there are a few techniques in the system that start from a disadvantage, which is worse than any of those positions we were in. In this case, locking horns. They're bending us forward, controlling our height zone, attacking our head. But this could just as easily be done from the side. Pick up something like a grip of death or grasp of death, which is basically doing the same thing. But is that the only way we can start at a disadvantage? Well, no, they could also, just like we did earlier, do it to different parts of our body. So in this case, something like a crushing hammers or squeezing the peach, where they're attacking our arms and we're at a disadvantage. Now, there's another way that we can think about this, and that would be any of our weapon techniques, where we're automatically at a disadvantage because they have a weapon and the risk of injury has increased tremendously. So to recap, the ways we just related locking horns was through the disadvantage, or starting from a disadvantaged position, and through the different ways in which we can control the height zone. We hope this video helps you understand the American Kenpo system a little bit better. Thank you very much.